Good morning, fam. It is another episode of Unpublic. This is episode 51. Today, I have Ray Ankrum, my brother from the Eight Black Hands, joining me today to make sense of the world the day after the Derek Chauvin trial ended with a guilty verdict on 3 counts. It was 3 for 3. Keith Ellison, our state attorney general in the state of Minnesota, had assembled a team of legal eagles who carried this thing across the finish line. Afterwards, yesterday, there were lots of press conferences. There was lots of talk in the news from the family of George Floyd and civil rights leaders, including Ben Crump, who was an attorney who came to the Twin Cities to kind of rally behind the case, and Reverend Al Sharpton and others. So it's over. It's been a long time. We've been waiting, pins and needles, to find out, would there be some justice for George Floyd? I had been relatively silent most of the time because I thought that justice wasn't possible in this case, that there would be no justice, and that Minnesota doesn't deserve any peace. The disparities in the systems that led to George Floyd laying on the pavement with a white man's knee on his neck for 8.5, maybe 9 minutes straight while he cried out for his mother, and he was suffocating and dying right before the faces of folks standing there with phones and with cameras. One who was a black teen, who is actually most credited with capturing all of this on video. The situations that led to that, the systems, the way of being in Minnesota that led to that continue today. They're not over. We have a verdict in one case, but is a verdict justice? Ray, I'm going to bring you in, brother. Let's talk about it, man. It's the day after. You're not here in Minnesota, but you're definitely a black man in the country, in the United States. So how do you feel like the day after we've gotten this verdict?
I mean, I feel no differently than prior to the verdict, man. I mean, like, come on, man. Why are you trying to set me up? Listen, nothing has changed, man. At 4:30, I think simultaneously as the verdict was being announced, a little girl was being murdered in Columbus, Ohio. Name was Makia Bryant. So if you're asking me, has anything changed? Absolutely not. Nothing has changed, man. Like 7.9 miles down the road, as this trial is going on, Dante Wright gets murdered, right? This is during the trial. This is during the trial. And so, like, there's a reckless abandonment in terms of, like, black lives, man. And so until there's police reform nationally, we're still going to be running into these incidents where black and brown casualties are going to be happening.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned Dante Wright happening at the same time, because it's almost like we can't stop the machine. We're doubling up. So for those, I mean, I'm sure no one listening or watching this right now doesn't know, but Dante Wright is a 20-year-old father of one who was stopped at a traffic stop not far from Minneapolis, not far from where everything took place with George Floyd. And he was killed. He was murdered by a 26-year veteran police officer who mistook her gun for her taser. And that's the explanation in shooting him. And now he's gone. So we have another family. And his mother said, I think at a press conference, the thing that I think is where I started out today, she said, there can never be any justice in my kid's case. So we're not even fighting for justice. We're fighting for accountability, right? And what many people who don't know, who aren't from here, and Ray, I'm sure this is the same where you're at, but there are a lot of names. So now the public knows Dante. Now the public knows George Floyd, but they'll never know all the names that came before them here in Minnesota. And I'm sure in your area, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a travesty how. So I can't. This is not just exclusive to. This is not just exclusive to black men, black women, the poor, man. Like, and people that know and understand that they are poor. These are the folks that are being treated badly in this country. This is a country that just doesn't really care about poor people, man. And until we're able to kind of coalesce around each other in order to understand that main point is that, you know, poor and disenfranchised people are going to continue to get the shaft from top 2%. We're going to continue to be having these conversations weekly, bro. Like, remember Charles was like, man, I'm getting to the point where I'm immune to these kinds of conversation and these things happening. I feel like I'm getting to that point now. And I never wanted to be there.
Yeah, I mean, when you say immune, you don't mean immune to it possibly happening to you. You mean immune to reacting. Like, yeah. I mean, if you go back long enough, there were all these cases that were the pivotal moment. This is a pivotal moment in history. I heard people saying that yesterday, and even the president got on board with a little bit of, you know, this is a pivotal moment in something. I don't know what he was talking about. And the governor here in Minnesota, you know, this is a moment. We've had so many this is a moments in our lifetime, right? Like we've had, if, you know, you'd have to be old enough to remember Rodney King. But for me, that was like my pivotal moment. You know, I'm in my 20s and, you know, I'm like, oh, my God, no justice, no peace. We got it on tape. Everything's going to be over with now that it's on tape. I mean, before we never used to see it. I mean, and imagine this. With Rodney King, there was no cell phones. So to get something on tape was a big deal. You had to carry this big ass camcorder.
Definitely. Yep.
Right. And that's why the Rodney King video is all grainy and everything. But it's still good enough to see those cops whooping his ass, all of whom got off. And America was more worried about the outcome, the uprising in Los Angeles afterwards, than the beating of the black man.
But let me ask you a question, right? Because I just sent a tweet out, right? So, you know, and I'm guilty of this. So this is more of a reason why this tweet kind of hits home. How many of us get these jury duty notices and throw them away? Or these jury duty notices and we're like, damn, I don't want to do no jury duty. I'm never doing jury duty or whatever, right? And so then when folks go and they're like, all right, well, you know, I'm gonna be judged by my peers. Peers don't really look like you. Because so many people are deferring jury duty notices or whatever, right? Because yesterday, I mean, like the verdict surprised me. It surprised me that they came back in 9 hours, right? Because I thought, based off of it being a jury of his peers, I'm gonna be honest, I felt like there was gonna be one person that was gonna be like, all right, well, he's justified in doing it, right? And thank God that didn't happen. But I thought it was gonna be a hung jury.
I mean, it was what I had heard that part of the strategy of the defense was to find whoever that one juror was going to be and make sure you gave them enough suspicion or reasonable doubt to make them hang the jury. And it didn't happen. So that's, you know, a little bit that's a little bit to the credit of Keith Ellison and the team that he put together, that they had such an ironclad case. That the defense threw up all kinds of stuff. You know, maybe it was the carbon monoxide from the car that was on, and the other team was like, "Yeah, the car wasn't on," and plus it's an electric vehicle or something like that. I remember just thinking, "Yeah, y'all covered all your bases on that one." This is an important thing you say about the jury selection too. So yesterday at dinner with my kids. I haven't talked to them a lot about this case. I don't like to traumatize my kids in process with CNN's kind of like breaking news. And, you know, every 5 seconds it was black man trauma dead, you know, for weeks. I didn't want to do that part. So, but did talk to him a little bit at dinner last night and was asking, you know, how much do you know about this? Like, have you heard about this? Because it was on in the background. The verdict was on in the background while we ate dinner. And it was interesting you bring up this point about jury duty because my oldest, who's still at home right now, is 13, and he had a very vague sense of how juries work, right? So I felt like, okay, this is the learning opportunity to talk about, number one, how do you get picked for jury duty? One of his teachers had talked to him about her doing jury duty. So he had kind of an idea from his teacher. One of his teachers had done it. And my daughter too, who's 10, also had a teacher that talked to them about jury duty. So those are the type of things I think a moment like this is made for teachers to be able to use the moment, something that all kids are going to be hearing about, not just for trauma porn, but or injustice porn, but for for a way to break down what the productive things citizens can do to participate, like the attorneys. Is anybody teaching kids in school like what these attorneys did and how brilliant it was, what strategies they used? The activists in the streets who put the pressure on this. Can we teach about that? So I wanted to ask you about this because I noticed a Twitter. I'm going to put this up right here, right now. Just it's not a big deal, but I mean, I saw a teacher this morning who was kind of saying, I think sometimes we need to wait for children to bring things up before we rush lesson plans. And she says it's not fair to say someone isn't doing the work because they never mentioned something. But she's talking about these type of traumatic classes and kind of the push for teachers to use it as a teachable moment. This teacher here, I had to quote this and tweet it out as ironic. Miss Lay Math says, agree. I teach math. Current events rarely align to my lessons, and making it happen feels inauthentic. And, you know, she says her principal told her to talk about things like the verdict one-on-one outside of class. Bro, I just want to ask you about this for more than one reason. But for one, this is why people hate math, right? Like, you know, for her to be bragging about, I want to make sure that my math is not relevant at all to anything that is going on in the world, to me is hilarious. Hilarious. Yeah. And then her principal tells her to only talk about this one-on-one outside of class. What's happening there, bro? Tell me.
So here's what's happening, bro. Like, first off, right, I would like to know the students that she's teaching, right? Because if she's teaching students that look like us, I want my kid as far away from her as humanly possible. Right. Because like, you know, so this is a different CRT that folks sometimes confuse and conflate. This is culturally responsive teaching that we're talking about here. Right. So, you know, in order for you to, like, we talk all the time, especially in math, right? For those of you that are watching the show right now, shout out to the math teachers. But we talk about making things relative to students, right? And so when they're taking state tests and they're doing all these things and whatnot, seeing names that look like them, because research says that it garners more attention from the student if they're able to see things that resonate for them in terms of the lives that they're living. And so one of the things that we did in Harlem, when I was in Harlem, and we, you know, have to do less of it out in Riverhead, but we made sure that as we wrote these lessons or whatever, or as we got kids prepared for life in general, that they were able to use the lessons that they learned, not only in school, but also in the neighborhoods or whatever, right? Because that's super important. It's like, yo, you're not just learning in school, you're also learning in your neighborhoods. You're also, you're learning life at school. And so in order to combine the two and mesh, that's how you create a good citizen, man. And so to read that, or whatever, you know, on Twitter. I'm going to take a break away from Twitter.
That's not the right, you know, way to handle this. But I mean, let me show you another one. This is one from someone who I really respect.
Absolutely.
Jasmine Lane is somebody who I really respect. She lives here in Minnesota. She grew up here in Minnesota. So she's very, I think, kind of steeped in the Minnesota culture. But this, to me, I mean, honestly, I'm going to, you know, ask her to come on and so we could talk about this. Her and I go back and forth about whether or not kids, specifically my kids or kids of color, need to learn the so-called canon and things like, you know, Shakespeare and other. And I hate Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare is boring as hell. I don't think my kids need to learn it. And just because I say that, as it comes out of my mouth, I realize that school is culture war, because there are going to be people who don't want you to teach kids about things like George Floyd or those type of cases. And they see that as divisive and controversial and talking about the system in a way that doesn't show that America's a great country. To them is a big offense, but it's no big offense for you to shower my kid with dead white men and their letters as if these are the biggest contributions to human knowledge ever. Right. That's not offensive. Right. That's not controversial at all. That's not Eurocentric Anglophilia that you're trying to shove down my kid's throat. No, that's just normal. Why? Because the norm is white and the norm is white people. But in her tweet here that you see up on the screen, she says, what I told my students was that I won't be doing lessons on, you know, X subjects. And these subjects are the ones like George Floyd. But I'm knowledgeable and happy to answer questions or give space after school if they need it. Otherwise, we're gonna just keep reading Macbeth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean,
to hell with the Macbeth, bruh.
So I see it from both perspectives, though, right? Because like with her, we know that she knows she's from Minnesota, and so for her to open herself up to say, you know what, I'm going to create the space in order for you to come and talk to me, because I want to talk about this if you want to talk about it, right? And so for me, I'm sending out a remind message to my middle school students, just letting them know that, hey, we're aware of this verdict or whatever.
Wait a second, bro. Let me just stop you for a second, though. Isn't that kind of othering the topic? No. Like when you say we can do it outside of class, not in the normal stream of education, but outside of class. Come see me later if you want to talk about the fact that a man was lynched in your community.
Yeah, but you got to look at it like this, right? Do you want somebody having this kind of conversation with your kid if they're not comfortable with it themselves, right? Okay. And so like you have to have someone that is knowledgeable about the content, but then also comfortable with talking about the content in order for them to have an informed conversation with your child. I don't want people having uninformed conversations with because then I got to go home and then I got to unteach what was taught. In terms of like, I was, my son's class, his economics class, and his teacher. Shout out to his teacher, because he does touch on these things and whatnot. But sometimes I gotta leave late because I gotta see what this teacher is saying to these seniors or whatever, because these are the kids that are about to go out into the world and change the world. So I just want to make sure that the messaging is correct. And if the messaging is not correct, then it's like, all right, well, I gotta write a lesson plan for later.
Yeah. It's funny. Just as you were saying that, Michelle Johnson had said, no, I would rather them not teach it if they are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It can do more harm than good, especially those teachers who feel like Chauvin got railroaded, and many teachers do. I think this is also something we never really talk about it, but it's got to be true. It's got to be true. I don't have any evidence of this, but Fox News is the most watched news station in America, right? Facts. So it's the most watched news station. And if you watch an hour of Fox News at night, you will feel like you went to an alternative universe if you are a fact-based person. Like Fox News is the most like faith-based. And faith, I don't mean faith in Jesus or God. I mean faith in white supremacy. Yeah. They are the most they are the church of alternative facts when it comes to anything having to do with race. So the idea that many of our teachers are not kind of like doing performative things during the day, but at night watching what's the dude on there that like everybody hates? Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
Yeah. Like that, they're not secretly watching Tucker Carlson, who's saying things.
Tucker Carlson kicked somebody off the show last night.
He got,
and you saw the laugh. Like I haven't seen a laugh like that since Howard Dean lost the presidency.
Bro, see, you gonna stop messing with Howard like that. You gonna stop giving because Howard Dean, honestly, now if we look back on it, on everything that we're talking about, that Fox News has gotten away with, that Donald Trump has gotten away with, the idea that Howard was kicked off a ticket or kicked out of the race because of a sound he made sounds hilarious at this point. But I want to play for you. Actually, let me put this up here and see. Like, this is the end. This is what you were talking about here last night, and you got to know that teachers are watching this. So here you go.
Just think that it was excessive and it shouldn't happen. And what I'd like to say,
the guy who did it looks like he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. So I'm kind of more worried about the rest of the country, which, thanks to police inaction, in case you haven't noticed, is like boarded up. So that's more my concern. But I appreciate your coming on, Ed Gavin. Thank you. Nope, done. Thank you.
Scene. I just
nope, done. Thank you. Nope, done. Thank you. Right?
But
supremacy yelling at you, barking at you. There is a teacher somewhere who watched that last night and felt like her dude was on his mark. Right.
But so all right, let's do some simple math here. Right? Do some simple math. If you got 80% of teachers that identify as white, right? Then if you look at the previous presidential election and you see the 70+ million people that voted for Donald Trump, then it's really easy for you to say that at least 35 to 40% of teachers supported Donald Trump.
I mean, yeah.
And that's on the low end. That's what I'm being conservative in terms of the numbers, right? Because I don't want to, I don't want to spit out numbers that I can't substantiate. I know that I can at least substantiate 35 to 40%. So then if they're listening to Donald Trump and they're also listening to Fox News or whatever, and like, what the hell are they saying to our kids? That's why I think Zoom is the great equalizer, bro. Because now, we can kind of listen in on some of the things that are being said in these classes and stuff, and hold people accountable.
Yeah, I mean, this is an article that had come out before about teachers that voted for Trump. And it says that Clinton won union households nationwide, but just by 8 percentage points. Exit polls show 51% to Trump's 43%.
See,
right? So yeah, 43%. And Clinton carried white college-educated women, but just barely. 51% to 45%. Among white women with a college degree, Trump won resoundingly 63% to 34%. Now,
see, that doesn't surprise me.
Damn.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Like,
I read this again because
I was all in those numbers.
Hearing what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Wait, among white women, without a college degree. Okay, I had it wrong though, but still, wow. Wow, he toasted her. In that sense, teachers who at last count were about 82% white and 70% female.
No, 76%.
Or 76% female actually outperformed other groups. Wow. But that was in their support for.
Yeah, but just because Clinton, they supported her, that doesn't mean that you didn't have people that did not support her.
Yeah. I mean, this is so I mean, I'm kind of like in some ways just like supporting your point in that you don't know who's who. When you get stopped by a police officer at night, you don't know that if the police officer who is stopping you is one of the people who is mentioned in the intelligence documents from the intelligence community that says that the police, that law enforcement and the military have been infiltrated by white supremacist groups, and that they have a well-defined national network of people that they have infiltrated with, that they are being trained and indoctrinated and recruited specifically for the purpose of being the person who pulls you over and whoops your ass or kills you, right? So the whole old night patrollers and patty rollers or whatnot, we talk about those things. First of all, do our kids know that? I just want to stop and ask this question. Do our kids learn that there is documented evidence and proof in American history and in contemporary times of what I just said, what I just talked about?
No. And if you try to teach it, you're going to get fired.
You're going to get fired. That's a point. I'm not saying that's the point, but Ray, that's a point. That's a big point, which is we know things to be true that we're not teaching our kids that actually could imperil their lives.
Absolutely, man. Some woman came on my Twitter feed last night, and she was she's like ed policy out of Seattle or something, right? And so she's like, oh well, CRT is the devil. Critical race theory is the devil, right?
Oh, here we go.
And so, I said to her, I sent her a link via OWL, Purdue University OWL. They do everything imaginable with APA. It's now 7th edition. And so I just sent her some academic writing on CRT, on what it is, the tenets, etc. Right? She sends me, and I'm like, read this, and then based off of what you read from this link, let me know the problems that you have with critical race theory. Right? She sends me back some opinion pieces. Right? And I said, yeah, listen, I'm going to read your opinion pieces or whatever. But if we're going to have a debate about this, it's going to be more helpful if you go and you get scholarship that tries to contradict critical race theory rather than you give me opinions about what you think critical race theory is. Because if you're trying to like undo, or if you're trying to be combative with something that has been established in the academy, then you have to combat it with something that's also from the academy. You can't just come with me about an opinion about someone that hasn't done the work, right? Because I saw that as well. I saw a couple of people that we look at like allies or whatever talking about, oh, critical race theory, bad, do the work. What the hell is the work? And so I'm starting to be unnerved a little bit in terms of like social media and just, but it's great because like I always say this, it's a difference between subtle racism and overt racism, right? I want to know who you are. I like my racism out in the open, right? So if you on Twitter, I'm screenshotting, I'm doing all these other things and whatnot, because when it comes back time, when the money runs out on the other side, and then you try to come back to this side, I'm gonna have my receipts to let you know exactly how I feel about you.
Yeah. I want to make sure that I like support your point again with you know, kind of the thing you were just talking about, a teacher. I'm going to turn the video off here. So this is, you know, in Loudoun County. I talked about this weekend last week, but in this case, a Virginia teacher says critical race theory has damaged the community and has as frustrated parents are demanding changes. And in it, basically, they're just talking about how equity training that's being given to teachers. And by the way, it's also being given in other places in government. Trump tried to get rid of critical race theory of any sort in government. But they're basically saying that it's divisive. It's actually making kids hate America. It's causing race issues and causing race problems as people split along the lines of race. So let's not talk about it. Right. I mean, this isn't surprising to me. Number one, it's Virginia. Number two, it's a teacher and it's a white woman in a classroom who hasn't grown up steeped in anything having to do with race otherization, like having to be the other race, like constantly. It's hard when you grow up in the privileged class, and in America, there, make no doubt about it, white people are a class of people that have had favorable advantage handed to them and don't know it. Right. It's invisible to them because it's the norm. It's not invisible to anybody else because the norm for others is injustice and continual and unceasing injustice in almost every area of life activity. Do I want my kid in this person's classroom?
Hell no.
And it's a resounding hell no. And you know, she could be a good person. She could be great. She could pay her taxes, salute the military, and do her shopping at Costco. She could do everything right in the world, and it still doesn't make her a good teacher for my kids. She might be a good teacher for Fox News viewing kids, right? Which I'm fine with. As a libertarian, I am fine with it. Like if you want to shower your kids in white privilege and insane inaccuracies about history, I am all for it. I support your right. I support your right to do it somewhere elsewhere.
Bro, like, your arguments about not all kids should be in the same schools with kids, it's starting to grow on me.
I hope so.
Bro, the more I see these people that are just railing against critical race theory and just teaching the truth in all aspects of the truth and not trying to, and as a history teacher, a former history teacher, not a former because I'm going back into the classroom. But as a history teacher, bro, it's like you have to bring in materials in order to teach both sides of what occurred. And then you're building capacity with students in order for them to develop their own ideas about what occurred. But you can't do that if you're not teaching them the truth about what occurred. It's insanity.
And in some cases, I think people feel like the truth is opinion. So
no, the truth happened.
Right. I mean, people are like, well, we can agree to disagree on the fact that that man was killed. Really?
No, he did.
No, he did. Like, unless you got some reanimation device where we can ask him, hey, how'd you die? No, he's dead. Well, videos don't show the full story.
Huh?
Okay. All right. Yeah, videos don't show the full story. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and back out this conversation with your dumb ass and get my child out of your classroom, right?
Listen, I say all the time, I say to folks, not every teacher education program is created equal. Right? You got some programs you come out and like people are hella woke and ready to go in and shake and bake, teach kids in the inner city, can teach kids in the suburbs, can teach kids anywhere. But then you got a lot of other programs to where they can only teach really well in suburban neighborhoods. They're just not equipped to go into the inner city around Black and brown kids and be successful.
So is it wrong for me to say that segregation could be good sometimes, and like not the way that we thought about segregation in the past, but if you have two people that are fighting and arguing all the damn time, like one thing you do is you separate them. You kind of like split them up. Go to your respective corners and stop. These culture wars that we're talking about in terms of how you teach about George Floyd, or whether you teach about George Floyd, or whether you let Black kids know that their government actually is acting against them on a regular basis. Like, if that's going to be a fight, let's just stop fighting like that. So when I say segregation could be a good thing, we don't all need to go to school, go to school together. I think people are getting a different idea than what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I want you to have the right to teach your kid racist shit. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I want you to have the right to not think that it's racist. Bro,
listen.
Right? So
when I encounter, and I'm giving you guys trade secrets right now, right? So if you're an educator and you found time and space in order to watch the show, thank you, shout out, share it, whatever. But when we have like racist occurrences at our school, the first thing that I think about is, where did this kid learn this? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's tricky because, you know, kids are exposed to a lot of things with social media and having the capacity to have tablets and Google or whatever. But a lot of this stuff is learned behavior from home, right? Mm-hmm. Like your parents are your first teachers. So if your parents are teaching you to be racist, right, then you're either gonna go to school and build and jail with others, and that's going to discredit the teachings that are happening at your house, or you're going to embrace the teachings that are happening at your house, and you're going to perpetuate the things that you're saying, right? The things that are being said to you at your house, all of which are just dangerous as hell, right? And we need to call it out. And the folks that it's happening with, the folks that you see railing against critical race theory, like mad and crazy, these folks that have their kids in schools, it's like, oh, damn, why don't you want your kid to know the truth about your people, right? Like, so it's confusing me. I'm perplexed because it's like, damn, you can openly admit that, all right, these things weren't right. These things shouldn't have happened this way. Slavery should have never occurred. But then when we get in classroom, we want to talk about why it shouldn't have occurred or whatever. It's like, oh, well, I don't want you to beat my kid up and make my kid feel bad about us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and listen, this is where I feel a little sympathetic. This is where the libertarian in me comes out, is like, if you feel like telling the truth about things like Thomas Jefferson was a sociopath, rapist, and a pedophile is demeaning to your child as a white person, and you don't want your white child to learn that, I support your right. This is why I support school choice. I support school choice because I think your child has a right to believe that Thomas Jefferson was a great founding father of something other than, you know, children as the product of pedophilia, right? Like, you know, you have a right to believe that if you want to. So I don't want to strip you of that right. I just don't want you, I just don't want you poisoning my children's intellectual development and their capacity to think straight with your white normed nonsense, right? So why don't we just go to our respective corners?
Yes, bro. Listen, man, is this right? So when folks are saying that now is the time, this is the time, it's time for change or whatever, right? Like, I'm not just thinking about, I'm not just thinking about police reform. I'm thinking about school reform. Now is you damn right. Now is the time. You people that are railing against critical race theory, now is the time for Black folks to open up their own schools and teach the kids the way that the kids need to be taught in terms of like from our lens, right? Because it's like, I'm not refocusing my lens in order to see the world how white people see it. I don't want to see the world that way. I'm not white, right? I can only see the world the way that I see it, and that's through the eyes of a Black man. And I know it's hard as hell for Black men out here.
Well, let me ask you this. Even if we didn't start new schools, the fact of the matter is, whether you like segregation or not, the schools are already segregated. So is there something that could be done with the Black schools? I mean, we have so many Black kids that are in all Black schools anyways already. So what would be the movement to making those schools conducive to what we're talking about right now? Like they're already in segregated schools. So
Bro,
we could.
so-
What could we do?
You gotta get these unions out of these schools. Man.
Oh, Lord. That's like taking pee out the water. Yeah, we gotta get this pee out the water so we can drink it. You know, like really, like tell me how that works.
Hold on one second. I gotta plug in my battery. Hold on.
Well, while Ray goes off and plugs in his battery, I just want to say, like, I'm looking at the conversation to you guys that you're having in the comments section, and I'm seeing what I'm seeing in you guys is what I see every day is that many of you are focused on pedagogy or how to teach or how teaching happens, which is usually what I am focused on myself is like, do we, like, I noticed that Bill Conrad said something here about the science of reading. And I know that Michelle Johnson, you concentrate on teacher prep and how teachers are prepared to teach and whether or not they can do it and do they have the skills. And I think several other you here are actually either teaching or working with teachers, and you similarly have a focus on the how do you teach. And I think what's being raised in this conversation today is another conversation that I don't always get into, which is the what do we teach, and why is the long march of civil rights of trying to get curriculum right for people of color to understand the world that they live in, and for white people to understand their contributions to a negative world for people of color, why that suddenly now is up for grabs. Like suddenly, like I grew up in the 70s, through the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, there was a push for increased inclusion and diversity and more openness. And that march has been going on for a long time. With the stuff around critical race theory, with Trump, the post-Trump world, it seems like all those bets are off. Like whatever train that was, that train hit a station and went off the rails. And now it's okay to argue about whether or not white people can use the N-word, as if there's an N-word. Let's be real. Let's be mature adults. There's no such thing as an N-word. Let's be real. There's nigger and there's the N-word, and those are two very different concepts, right? Nobody ever says, "Oh, N-word," and you get freaked out about it, right? Because those are two very different concepts. Let's be adults. What were you gonna say, Ray?
I was gonna say that if a white person says "nigga" around me,
yeah,
that you better be ready for the collect call.
What about if a Latino person does it, right?
From the jail. Yeah, so it's a little bit different for me in terms of just like,
no, it's not.
It's different for me, right? In terms of like
non-black people using the word. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but
I don't look at Latinos as non-black. Right?
Okay, well,
because they have African origins as well. It's just if they are willing to accept
white people have African origins.
Well, that's true, but not like Latinos.
It's a matter of timing. But all people have African origins. All people are Africans.
But there's but when you talk about Latinos, there's white identifying Latinos, right?
Yeah,
but then there's also black identifying Latinos. So like if you catch some of the darker hued folks from Dominican Republic or the Dominican Republic or from Puerto Rico, they identify as being African American, right? And so it's like, and they grew up that way. They grew up around black folks, right? And so for those people that have African ancestry or whatever, like how do I deny them that right to be able to say that word?
Well, see, now you're getting in a lot of trouble again, because now if you have a white kid in Virginia being taught that all people have African origins, you might have a problem with some of the parents.
Nah,
but let's go back to this point. Let's go back to this point around, and I see Tanji jumping in here. So to me, this is an important point. We try to focus diligently on how and what, the how and the what of teaching, the how to teach, how teachers are prepared. Are they prepared? Do they know what they're doing? You mentioned it earlier, like the colleges of education, like, all that stuff. We focus on that, and that is mostly uncontroversial in a way, because it's not racial or political or any of those things. It's really about the profession. But are we sidestepping when we do that and we have that solely as the focus? Are we sidestepping the responsibility to talk about what we teach, like the what, not the how?
You got to get Dr. Bill Conrad on the show, man. I think that a show with him on Unpublished.
I see he's in here. We'll put his comment on the screen here.
Yo, you got to get him on the show, man. Doing the show with him is like doing a show with your Wednesday show with Atlanta. What was your guy? You do a show with him every couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, we haven't done it in a while. White Noise with
Yes.
Jay. Yeah. Jay Wamstead.
Yeah. Bro.
Well, Bill, you have a, and I got your quote up here. It's a curriculum issue for sure. You have a invitation to come and join me. Mama Toya says, Chris, I've been saying it. Mama Toya really does like stay on top of me on things, and they fall through the cracks. But I like the idea because Bill focuses, like Tanji, who is on here now, and Michelle and others, focus on curriculum, instruction, teaching, learning, those things to me, which are hard sciences in a way. They're not opinion and they're not political. And you don't have Tucker Carlson saying at night, we don't need any better colleges of education. You don't hear him saying that. You don't hear him. No one anywhere on Fox News or on CNN or MSNBC is saying pedagogy doesn't matter, but they are arguing over what should be taught, not just how. Not the how of teaching. And I usually try and stay out of that debate because I'm for school choice, which allows me to stay out of that debate because I'm like, listen, if we all have a choice, then you can go to a white supremacist school. I could go to a black supremacist school. I could send my kids to a biracial kingdom. I can, we can all do our own thing. We could do, I could do Montessori or Waldorf. I could do one of the nature schools where kids run around outside in nothing but a diaper and just like, eat leaves and stuff. Like we could do whatever we want if we have school choice, right? But maybe that's irresponsible a little bit because honestly, the majority of the kids don't have school choice and they are going to be sitting in classrooms in segregated schools taught mostly by people who don't look like them. And definitely, even if they look like them, they're not economically like them. So we have, we have kids that are captive to a problem.
Honestly, bro, I think we need to do a weekly show on zip code choice. Right, because like people don't really like understand what it means to have the resources to be able to go and buy into whatever school district you want your kids to be in. And so, you got some folks that are just like, hey, listen, I want my kid to go to this school in the Hamptons, so I'm gonna go out and just buy this house for 4 years in order for my kid to go to this specific high school. Like, there's a lot of folks in this country that can't do that. Right. And so, or hey, I'm going to send my kid to this to this private school that costs $65,000 a year so they can learn about space orbiting or whatever. Like, hey, listen, a lot of people can't do that. But for them to have the luxury to be able to do that and then like look down their noses at the folks that can't, and then you want to relegate what we're teaching our kids or what we're allowed to have in our classroom, that's bullshit, bro.
Well, and I'm going to, again, supporting your point here. Here's a dad at a private school who wrote a scathing letter to Beerley about race focus. And, he said someone had to. Someone had to do it. A father fed up with an elite Manhattan prep school offers their heavy-handed focus on race won't re-enroll his daughter. And this school is like $54,000, I think, a year. He wrote this big, long letter, 1,700 words. It was all about, and this is him here, Mr. Anti-racism. And in it, he put like the thing that they all love to put is it's desecrating the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I'm like thinking to myself, y'all, you do remember you killed Dr. Martin Luther. Like nothing desecrates like your legacy, like killing you, right? Like, so y'all do realize he came in peace and he preached peace and integration, and y'all killed him. So how the hell is he showing up in your letter? And this isn't, a letter from a Birmingham jail. His version is, letter from a white supremacist law office. It's like it's a total different thing. But my only point in saying this is I'm glad that, when you have money on the table and you have school choice, there could be a school for this guy. Maybe it's not the school, he could be mad about it. He could do whatever he wants. But, what he can't do is say, I want all of you to change. What he can say is, I'm leaving. I'm taking my kid and we're going to go, form a school of ignorant young people. And I'm cool with that. Like, I'm so cool with that. So Tan G corrected me on her name, and I'm just going to tell people I'm terrible with names, but she put in the parentheses. I'm going to put it up so y'all can see. This is the way you help people. This is the way you help people. Is tan like the color and G like the letter? You know, G's up. So tan G. I'm sorry I got your name wrong. I just wanted to make sure that I came back in and corrected myself with it. Rodney Robinson says Virginia doesn't have school choice for poor people. There are tons of governor's schools and magnet schools for upper class families. And I do think that this is, like, yes,
it's a class issue.
Yeah, it's a class issue. This is the point. The point is school choice right now is for the middle class who do it through mortgages. It's for the upper middle class who do it through a combination of mortgages and private schools, and for the upper class who do it for straight up private schools that help, section them off. It's not controversial at all when we talk about school choice for those people. As a matter of fact, if we talked about taking it away from those people, that would be the end. That would be a problem, right? Like the way to make school choice palatable for everybody is to try and outlaw it for the middle, the upper middle, and the upper class. So try and outlaw. First of all, try and outlaw suburban schools that don't serve enough kids of color. Let's outlaw that now. And suddenly our conversation about school choice would be like, well, wait a second now. Before I was saying all that junk about how much I love public schools, but it was only because I'm in a white enclave where I spend $1 million on my mortgage, and I know none of y'all gonna move in.
Exactly.
But I'm okay with. I'm not okay with.
But if you do what you just said, you have them.
What do you mean?
Them. If black people start infiltrating neighborhoods and start infiltrating schools that they didn't have that white folks have exclusivity towards and whatnot, you'll have that show on Amazon. Them.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, don't get me started. We're gonna do another show on them. For anybody listening and watching, them is it's an Amazon program that tells me how far we have gone to normalize watching black pain as entertainment. It's like the movie Hostel for black people, and it's terrible. So don't watch it. Don't let your kids watch it. Whatever. Joy S. Jones says in rural parts of the country there is one school for each grade level. There is no choice available. And as somebody who lives far away from the cities, we've been talking a lot about Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. I don't live in the Twin Cities anymore, haven't for a long time. So where I live, the choices are definitely different than the choices in the Twin Cities that you have. And I get this sentiment 100%. Like there are parts of the country, there are parts of the country. The average school size of a school district is only 3,000. Yeah. So if your school district is bigger than 3,000, that's not even the average, size of a school district. There are like 14,000, 15,000 school districts in the United States, and the majority of them are small. The majority of them aren't like really big. So this idea that you have tons of choices, it's not to say you can't see, because I have seen rural charter schools. I've seen private schools or small schools start in places that are not in the city, like kind of far out. But Joy's point is well taken. What do you do if your kid is captive to a school system where there really isn't any other choice? So if they're getting something wrong, like CRT or something like that, you have a fight on your hands.
Right? So that's not critical race theory or culturally responsive teaching is not making it to rural America, bro.
Well, let me tell you why I think that might not be true, just from a Minnesota perspective. In Minnesota, our last statewide superintendent of education, who's now the superintendent of the Boston Public Schools, Brenda Casilius, she set up something throughout the state called the Centers of Excellence. And what these there were these centers that provided additional assistance to school districts that maybe they didn't have a department of. Like maybe you're such a small school district, you don't have a department of instruction, or like in Minneapolis, they might have a department of 30 people working on curriculum and instruction in their department, and a couple of cities over, they have nobody, right? So she set up these centers of excellence throughout the state to be that department for all these school districts, and one of the things that they were concentrating on was critical Well, not critical race theory. It was more like culturally responsive teaching or something like that to help. We have lots of rural districts that have like a high percentage, for instance, of Native American students or immigrating migrant students. We have some white districts that have a big population of Somali students for a very specific purpose. Like there's some manufacturing plant or something there that has drawn people, and the school districts don't know what to do about it. Right. So I'm only saying that to say not perfect, and it's not something that I think is making any real big difference, but it exists. There is a sense that in some of these rural areas that they are going to have to encounter some of this critical race theory or culturally relevant pedagogy. If no other reason, then it comes with money. The state not only is giving you that help, but the state is saying, here's some money. Here's some integration dollars to use towards this. I had a district call me not far from me. It's like a district or so over. And I didn't know what they wanted to talk to me about. When I got in the meeting, what they wanted to talk to me about was the state is about to give us like millions of dollars for integration. And we've never had it before. And we don't know what to do with it. And I was kind of like, wait a second. So your biggest problem is you about to get some money and you don't know what to do with it? Yeah. I mean, we've got all these like migrant kids and Somali kids, and some of them are not having the best time in our schools, and we're about to get millions of dollars, but that don't mean that just because we're getting the money, we know what to do with it. Like, what do we buy? Like, you know, so not perfect.
You better get some folks that can deal with trauma is what you need. That's the first. You better get some school psychologists up in there. If you sit there and you talking about, so bro, but you raised an interesting question about Minnesota, man. And so there's Native American students in Minnesota. So if I'm teaching in Minnesota, how the hell don't I tell them that this is their country that was taken from them? Like, how do I not teach that to them? Right. So like I would get fired in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Right there, you just made the point of what we are talking about in general, which is if you taught that version of history, you might have white parents who say that's not how it really happened. And it becomes a point of protest. Now you have, I don't think we've had that as much as we're having it now. It's now becoming like white people are getting aggressive and militant. Not all of them. Some white people in these stories that are flaring up show you a militant white people who are like, listen, I'm sick of hearing all that stuff. Like I've been hearing for years about how we should be guilty as white people and whatnot. I don't want to hear it anymore. I don't blame them. I'm not like, listen, do you, like, I'm okay with you doing you, but I just don't want my kid in the crossfire of your ignorance, your inability to like
be empathetic.
That's a great word.
That's what it boils down to.
That's a great word. Do you have any racial empathy? It's kind of like in some ways when I'm a man and you hear feminists talk, and oftentimes the feminists talk about the patriarchy, and there's a way to be very defensive about like, well, I'm not part of the patriarchy, or I worked hard for everything I got as a man. Like, ain't nobody gave me nothing. I don't have no privilege and blah, 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 whatever. I get it from that perspective. Now, I don't always understand, and you know this, I don't always understand the intersectional stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Because, like when people start, I saw a TikTok clip not long ago that basically said that black men are like white women when it comes to intersectional things. They're equal to white women.
They're doing that again?
Yeah, it was like it was people of color feminists who were saying that black men are as problematic as white women because of our patriarchy. And at my age, I was like, whoa. Slow the train down. Let's not go there. But I'm saying all of this, some of this can seem tangential, and it's really not in my mind, because all of this is coming down to this other question that I don't think I spend enough time thinking about, that I haven't cared enough about, which is the how rather than the what. I'm sorry, the what rather than the how. The how we teach is something that I focus on and I care about. Do our teachers know how to teach reading? Do they know how to teach math? Have they been properly trained? Are they properly supported? What is our evidence to answer any of these questions? What are the outcomes? You as a principal, as a superintendent, as a school leader, as a leader of multiple schools, I think have to live in those questions all the time, right?
All the time, yeah, definitely.
But the what? Like, do you ever have to like live in the question of like, how are we going to teach the Civil War? Like, does that ever become a problem for you?
No, not at all. Because like, I feel like, for me, especially when it comes down to like subject areas that can be controversial, like I'm hiring my history teacher. So like even I'm overstepping the principal to say, listen, I'm gonna make this higher for any person that's coming in to teach history to our students, only because I've taught it before. It's my area of expertise in a sense, and that I know what and how I want it to be taught. So it's like I want you to be able to bring in historical documents in order for kids to be able to dissect these documents so that they can know exactly what's going on. I don't want your opinion about anything, right? Unless the kids ask you about your opinion. I just want you to present the facts and then allow for the kids to decipher what's what based off of just like their interpretation of the facts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where you get into the whole, that's where the problems start in terms of like white folks not being able to kind of accept critical race theory of culturally responsive teaching, is that they no longer have the control over the information that their kids are getting or the truth that their kids are getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're doing it in a way in which you're not adding your opinion, you're only bringing in documentation that shows this way or this way, and then allowing kids to decipher and make the decision as to like what was right and what was wrong or whatever, then you're doing your job.
So as we get close to time here and we're wrapping, like, you know, just in your situation with the teachers and the schools that you have, and it comes down to this verdict that was happening yesterday, is there anything that's different? Is this, you know, do you wake up with this on your mind of we should do something through our schools with this, or how are you handling it? How are you thinking about it?
Fortunately for me, I work with folks. I don't really like using the word woke, but I work with folks that
are kind of wokish.
Yeah, that are kind of wokish, that are engaged, that are engaged and kind of understand what's going on in society. And so they do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of like having those conversations about race, because like what's interesting is if you are in a school and you have white folks that are race conscious, and then they're having conversations with other white folks that may not be as race conscious, and you just sit back and you like, it's really entertainment to see them like get after each other in terms of like how they should be and how they show up for folks that are disadvantaged or less fortunate than they have been and whatnot. So like I can walk in on a conversation or whatever with someone straight up saying like, listen, my privilege has allowed me to be here in order to do these types of things or whatever. And so with that privilege, I'm going to kind of break barriers in terms of like how we have conversations about race, how we have conversations about just like intersectionality and like all kinds of things that you talk about. So shout out to them. Shout out to the people that are doing the work. Those are the people that are doing the work while we're seeing these subtle messages on Twitter about do the work. No.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that that's the world that you have constructed with your educational environment, and that
always
like, you know, so no, and it sounds like you have had a process over time of like creating a reality, like creating like you know, a school leader can create a reality for the children in their care, in their jurisdiction, that that changes the game. So you know, when I hear you talking right now, that's exactly what I'm hearing. I'm hearing like there's deliberative work. Number one, who you hire. Let's just start there, right? Like hire the right people. Every leader knows that. Every leader knows it's a shame that there's so many leaders in education who can't hire who they want, though.
No, some people's hands are forced. Like my school is a unionized charter school, and that's a unicorn because I don't think unions should be in charter school. That's just
yeah.
But you know, there's some principals that work in school districts, like you're getting somebody that's walking in the door with their paperwork saying, "Hey, I was assigned here,"
and this is it. This is it. Well, Ray, thank you, brother, for coming on short notice. I appreciate it. I think this has been very helpful. I needed some academic heft to this conversation, in that I'm talking as a parent of children in the schools who wants them taught certain things, but it's nice to have folks like you to be able to co-sign or back up or even challenge any of these thoughts from the perspective of somebody who sees educators and a school and students in a classroom every day, because I don't always understand what the big deal is. I really don't get like why we can't just teach kids the facts about racism and structural racism in the United States, the empirical fact, not like the Chris says it's fact, but there is no way to do research on these things as a scientific mind and not come up with the empirical truth of systemic racism in the United States. Right. So it's hard. I appreciate you, brother. I also appreciate everybody who came in. Tangi. You have an open invitation to come on to the show because you have so much knowledge and expertise. Would love to talk to you about it. It would make this show smarter. Bill Conrad, you have an open invitation to come on. The same thing. You have expertise and knowledge that we could talk about that would make this show better. Michelle Johnson, you have an open invitation to come back again because you have expertise. Let's keep talking. Let's keep talking about these things, and let's do a little bit more. I'm going to challenge us here at the end, since we're at the end of time here. I'm going to challenge us to do more than talk when it comes to things like activism and the work around justice. My sister, Nakima Levy Armstrong, here in the Twin Cities, is responsible for a great deal of what you see on TV about the organizing and the activating and mobilizing of community whenever there's an injustice here in the Twin Cities. So you probably know about George Floyd and about Dante and Philando Castile and others, largely in part to the work and the activism that Nakima has done. She is a civil rights attorney, former law professor, advisor to Black Lives Matter, a constant presence and voice in the Twin Cities for justice. And she is also a master organizer and a master activist when it comes to how you get cases to be seen and heard, and to challenge the power structure, the governor, the leaders of police officers and others in ways that they can't handle. She led a several-month campaign when the police department in North Minneapolis actually had several killings of Black men that created an encampment of hundreds of people who camped out in front of the police department for weeks, as a matter of fact, in the winter. Right. And didn't leave it alone until there was justice. This is Nakima. This is the work that she does. What I have up right now is her being interviewed recently by Oprah, which I am happy to see her get her due nationally, because we have lots of activists that talk about it, but not walk about it. We have lots of celebrity activists who get on Twitter and get on MSNBC and have a lot to say, but we have very few that are at every march like Nakima is, and organizing people and doing it in a very smart way. If you want to help her and support her, you can go to Wayfinder Foundation, and it's wayfinder.foundation. I have up here the What We Believe tab from them. You can go and see what they believe. But again, Wayfinder.foundation is the foundation that Nakima leads. I have a connection to that foundation because I actually was the founder of that foundation years ago. And Nakima is the executive director of that foundation. This foundation makes direct investments into Black women and women of color that want to be activists in their communities. So that's where the money goes. That's what the money is for. It's to produce people like Nakima, who want to spend substantially more time activating and challenging the systems that do harm to our communities. So there you go. There's my pitch at the end of this show for us to do something solid and real rather than watch CNN and shake our fist at the TV, but don't offer anything material value to the movement and to the cause. Thank you all for watching. We will see you tomorrow for another episode of Unpublic. Again, Ray Ankrum, thank you so much